Today I'm going to talk about the Big Seven, which is an alternative division strategy that we've been using with the kids. This strategy is nicknamed the Big Seven because the division box looks like a 7 once they draw out when they're doing the division. This strategy helps the students understand long division as they utilize some of the skills that they've learned with estimation, critical thinking skills, and thinking about those whole numbers involved in a given problem. It does not require finding the best multiple to be found at each step, kind of like what we used to do when we were younger. You had to figure out exactly how many times a number went into another number, and sometimes you would have that scratch paper over to the side. So instead, you'll see here in just a second, there can be a little bit more extra steps that they're doing, but not as much of the messy work. Students are going to use the numbers that make sense to them throughout this process. Therefore, although all the students may get to the answer to the problem and it's all the same, the number of steps taken and the multiples that they work with might vary based on the kids already, their understanding of number sense with their multiples. Let's go ahead and pull up a division problem. So today let's do 16 divided into 739. What we usually would do is encourage the kids to come over to the side and create something that we like to call the box of knowledge. That box of knowledge is where the students are going to be writing down the information that they have or that they already know about their multiples of 16. So we're assuming all kids will probably start out with 16 times 1. It gives them a good basis of where to start. They have something in their box of knowledge. So 16 times 1 is 16. A lot of the students, they'll go on from there and say 16 times 10. And they know that they're just going to add that 0 to the end, so that makes 160. Now they have two things that they can use in their box of knowledge. Let's continue on with 16 times 2 is going to equal 32. And then usually the kids will go ahead and go 16 times 20 will equal 320. I've also had some kids in class that would look at that 16 times 10 and say, well, I can figure out 16 times 5 because that would be half of it. So great strategy that they're using, some good thinking there. So now they have 16 times 5 equals 80. And I've even had some kids say, well, I can figure out 16 times 15 by adding that 160 and the 80 from the 6 times 10 and the 6 times 5, which is going to give us 240. And let's see, let's go ahead and go with 16 times 3, which is going to give us 48. Now, the students, again, they could stop here if that's all they know about the multiples. They can always come back and add more if they need to. That's perfectly okay if they think of something different. We can go ahead, if I know 16 times 3, I can do 16 times 30, which equals 480. And we'll go ahead and stop there. And then the kids, what they're going to do is they're going to make that division box there look like a 7. That's why it's called the Big Seven. And they're going to use their box of knowledge and their multiples to figure out how many times 16 is going to go into 739. A lot of times I encourage the kids to find the biggest number that they know that will go into it so that we can subtract out most of that number at the beginning. So let's go ahead and let's look at 16 times 30. I'm going to write over here to the side that I'm using that multiple of 30 with 16. And then I'm going to subtract out the 480. And this might be something, this should look familiar with you. From way we did it, we would subtract that out and then figure out how many more times that it needs to go into it. So we have 9 there. We'll borrow from the hundredths place to make 13 groups of 10. That's going to give me 5 groups of 10 and then 259. So now we're going to go ahead and look over again to the side, and let's say, well, I can't use 16 times 30 anymore because that 480 is bigger than the 259 that I have here. So let's see, what would be the next good? Oh, I can't use the 16 times 20, that's too much. Let's go with that 16 times 15, which is 240. So I'll write that multiple over here that I used 16 times 15. And let's subtract out that 240. All right, so now we're going to be looking at the 19. Of course, 16 is going to go into that 19 at least one more time. So I'm going to put that down here that I'm using a multiple of 16 times 1. I'm going to minus out the 16. And it leaves me with a remainder of 3. Now, depending on the problem that the students are doing, they'll have to decide whether or not they need that remainder, or if that remainder is the answer, or if they're going to drop the remainder. And then the kids are going to come over here to the side, and they're going to add up all the multiples that they did. 30 plus 15 plus 1 is going to give me 46. So our answer to this problem will be 46 with a remainder of 3. Now, we always encourage the kids to check their work. Most kids feel comfortable with checking their work with multiplication because they feel comfortable with that. So let's just go ahead. We'll make one more slide and we're going to check for this. So our answer was 46 with a remainder of 3, and we're going to multiply that by that 16 to make sure to see if we can get that 739. I'm going to reserve my remainder over here to the side because we don't want to forget about it. We'll bring it in play in a little bit. So let's go ahead and let's do that box method that I talked about in the other video. If you haven't watched that yet, you can go to my how-to videos and look at the box method video. And we're breaking apart our 46. I'm going to do 40 plus 6 using that knowledge of place value, breaking it apart. And then that's going to be times the 10 plus 6. And then I'm going to be multiplying from the top with the cross, and then that's going to be 400, 40 times 10. Then I have 10 times 6, which is going to give me 60. And again, we use this to help kids keep everything nice and neat and hopefully not forget about any numbers. We have 6 times 6 is 36. And then 6 times 40 is going to give me 240. Now I'm going to add up these columns right here, and then I'll add those two together. So this gives me 640 right here, and then this is 96. We're going to add those up. And a lot of kids will feel comfortable with the lining it up right there, and that's okay. 6, 13, we're going to carry in that group of hundreds. 736. Now remember, we don't want to forget about that remainder because it is part of the number. So then the kids are just going to add that right back in. And our answer gives 739, which was what we originally divided that 16 into. So therefore our number is, we are checked with that problem. I hope this gives you a little bit more insight into how to do the Big 7. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks.